Welcome to today's session, one of the later sessions in the day, but definitely one of the more interesting ones that we're going to talk about, which is to do with ESG and building sustainable value over time. Given that we've had in the last few months a number of huge global debates when it comes to climate action, as well as how to build a sustainable future, particularly with Glasgow and COP26, it's very important that companies understand how to execute their strategies in a modern, efficient way. So I'm very pleased to say that joining us for this discussion is Rishi Kapoor, the co-chief executive of Investcorp, the alternative asset manager with a global footprint. Rishi, thanks for being with us.
Mustafa, it's great to be with you.
Well, you're joining us down the line, and it's lovely to talk about this, and we're at the Expo site, and very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say about ESG and strategy. But perhaps I can put the hypothesis to you first for a quick sort of yes, no, and then you can explain. But if an investor uses ESG framework these days, are they going to outperform an investor that doesn't choose to use those metrics?
Well, Mustafa, if the answer is yes, no, my answer is an unequivocal yes. But look, this used to be a topic of conversation some couple of years back, whether pursuing ESG practices would come at the cost of sacrificing returns. That debate is well and truly behind us. I mean, even Harvard, I think, has put out a research study which indicates that companies that pursue active ESG engagement with their stakeholders tend to produce excess returns to the tune of 5-6% on average. So that debate, I think, quantitatively as well as qualitatively, is truly behind us. I guess the more important question is perhaps why. Why is it the case that if you pursue sustainable practices, you are likely to outperform? And in our experience, I think it stems from three primary considerations. Look, we know that outperformance in the long run is highly correlated with a strong following from three primary constituencies any company has: its customers, its providers of capital, including the shareholders, and its employees. And by embedding principles of sustainability and responsibility into its business activities,
yes,
effectively what a company is doing is it's creating strong engagement with these three pillars. There are three most important constituencies, which means that the customers are attracted to the company's products, the employees, the talented ones in particular, because there is a war for talent, as we know, want to work at such firms, and the banks and investors are looking to provide capital to such firms. When you have those three working for you, it shouldn't come as any surprise that in the long run, these companies are going to deliver excess returns because they have the competitive advantages in terms of capital and people and customer following that you need for long-term success.
Rishi, you've got a unique vantage point at Investcorp because on the one hand, you talk to investors when you're raising funds, when you're raising capital, but also you're deploying that capital as an investor. So how does that 360 view influence how ESG criteria and factors incorporate themselves into your strategy and into your day-to-day?
You're so right, Mustafa. You're bang on. I mean, we are a steward in terms of investing the capital of our clients, of our investor base, into opportunities that will not just generate returns and value for them, but shall generate those returns and value in a sustainable manner. Now, over the last couple of years, I think all of us recognize that there is a heightened appreciation and awareness of the importance of sustainability, both from the perspective of risk mitigation as well as long-term value creation amongst all constituencies: investors, regulators, employees, shareholders, and others. Now, we've been engaging with all these stakeholders, as you rightly pointed out, and that engagement has gotten even more intense over the last couple of years. What we see, Mustafa, is that investors, looking at that dimension first, they are increasingly keen to align their own core values and beliefs with their investments. We call it, we refer to it a little bit colloquially as letting your capital speak for you, or letting your money talk, colloquially. Now, what that means is investors are seeking greater standardization towards measurement and reporting. They are looking to invest in opportunities that in turn provide innovative solutions to the biggest issues regarding sustainability and environment and climate change today. And the capital providers, i.e. the banks and others, are looking to provide innovative financing structures to support the development of such innovative sustainability-focused solutions. Now, in addition, I think you know that we are a signatory to the UNPRI. What that has done is it has really helped us think through in a systematic manner what is the essential plumbing needed to deliver the outcomes that our investors and key stakeholders are seeking. So, when we look at, ultimately at the end of the day, most of our investments are channeled into private companies because we are an alternatives focused manager, as you know. What we find is that the other dimension, those underlying companies and their management teams also understand very clearly that the value that can be derived from thoughtful consideration of such issues regarding sustainability, and in particular, focusing on those issues that are truly material for the company's long-term prospects. So it's been an insightful journey, and we'll obviously make sure that we benefit both from the engagement with both our constituencies, the companies, as well as the investors. But more importantly, we share our own 4 decades of experience with them to help them on their own journey.
I mean, you've got a track record there, not just in terms of long-term sustainable returns, but also 2019, for example, you piloted ESG in India, and also you've appointed a senior executive to be responsible for ESG. But when it comes to investment decisions and the due diligence process, can you say that you're including ESG factors as risks that need to be assessed? And would you, decide against an investment if those risks presented themselves during the due diligence process?
Yeah, again, a great question, Mustafa. You're right. Whilst we've been a responsible investor at our core for 40 years now, dating all the way back to our beginning, the formal ESG journey at Investcorp really started in earnest about a little over 2 years ago, just prior to the onset of the pandemic, in fact. And you're right, we did use India as our pilot because it was a very unique situation for us, an emerging market that we had recently entered, where the primary priorities of the day were focused on business ethics, governance, human labor practices, a focus on the environment and resource utilization, etc. But around all this, Mustafa, what's transpired is that if you distill it all down to one fundamental premise that guides our ESG policy at Investcorp, it's one of responsibility. And basically what we've done is we've taken this fundamental premise of responsibility and we've created a whole ecosystem. And the E, C, and O over here each have a specific meaning within that ecosystem word. The E stands for being a responsible employer, the C stands for being a responsible citizen, and O stands for being a responsible operator. So ultimately, if you think about our ESG strategy, it's actually fairly straightforward. It's really to embed this ecosystem of responsibility into our core values and into the thinking and the DNA of our underlying investments so that it's an integral part of all our activities across all our businesses, and so that we can in turn deliver on our overarching corporate purpose of enriching the lives of future generations. Now, there are 3 universal considerations that we will apply across all investments. Back to your question, which is how do we think about the risks and whether we will invest based on those risk assessments or not. So the 3 universal dimensions for us are a focus or a commitment to social equity, diversity, and inclusion, a commitment towards managing natural resources and climate change, and an unwavering focus on business ethics for best-in-class governance. In addition, we'll use the SASB principles to define industry-specific material issues that would affect a company. And each investment that we evaluate, we will assess the characteristics of the underlying industry and the company and their policy framework against these dimensions to decide A, where they stand, and B, most importantly, how can we help them on their journey through the 4 or 5 years that we plan to own this company or asset for. This is really at the core of what Investcorp stands for. We published our responsible business report for 2021 today. It lays out everything that I just described to you, but just to give you a few illustrations where you see how we've implemented in practice what we've been talking about for a while now on this call. In terms of diversity, almost 50%, 48% to be precise, of our new hires in 2021 were female. We have formed a partnership with Exponents in the US to invest into and seed asset managers from diverse or minority-led backgrounds. And almost 40% of the investments we've made in that space to date are, in fact, with such managers. In terms of climate, one of our portfolio companies, ABAX in Scandinavia and Norway, is already net zero, carbon neutral. In terms of inclusion, one of our portfolio companies in India, where we piloted ESG formally, is Nephroplus. It has provided almost 5,000 dialysis sessions every day in the last year at 1/8 the cost of what a dialysis session costs globally. Talk about inclusion, right? Fresh to Home, another company, has resulted in a 90% reduction in food waste. Talk about food sustainability and food security. One of our companies in the US, RoadSafe, has a 40% lower rate of time lost due to incidents in terms of promoting health and safety and well-being of its employees. So these are all illustrations. They kind of give you a very clear sense of how we approach this and how we wrapped a holistic approach, that ecosystem approach, if you will, around responsibility into everything we do.
Rishi, thank you so much. Really appreciate you talking to us today. Best of luck with the ESG strategy going forward.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. Great seeing you again.